How's it going, guys? So it's been a very busy morning, but got some time to myself. Want to talk some boxing. Had a fight on my mind for the past half hour that I really want to do a video on. It's about time I did a breakdown of the upcoming cruiserweight title fight in Russia between Denis Lebedev and Murat Gassiev. Now, you guys that have been following me obviously already know this, but I am a huge fan of the cruiserweight division. The cruiserweight division is my favorite division, and there's one reason why, and it's because we get fights like this. Okay, we get fights like this consistently, and what I mean by that is fights that are very competitive, fights that are explosive with top level punchers, top level athletes, top level fighters, and it's just a division where there are so many explosive matchups, so many 50-50 fights that are very difficult to predict. And I like to do videos and talk about fights that are difficult to predict, fights that could have multiple different outcomes. And this is one of those fights, and that's why I wanted to make this video, because I'll enjoy talking about it and breaking it down. Now, let's talk about Denis Lebedev for a second. Let's assess him as a fighter. Let's go through his resume and all that. Now, off the top of my head, Denis Lebedev has a fantastic resume. I mean, he's fought so many top-level cruiserweights that it's unreal. I mean, he fought Marco Huck, he fought Guillermo Jones, he fought Latif Coyote, he fought Victor Ramirez. Yes, these are all top-level cruiserweights. He fought Enzo Macronelli, who was a long-time cruiserweight champion at one point. He also has some victories over some past their prime fighters like Roy Jones Jr. He knocked Roy Jones Jr. out in the 10th round. He also has a decision victory over James Toney. Now, it's hard to give him too much credit for those two fights because it has to be said those guys were old men, way past their prime. I mean, Roy Jones, he was still fast, still a little bit explosive, still a little bit dangerous early on, but, he didn't really have the stamina or the determination or the chin to really be an elite level cruiserweight at this stage. So, a victory over Roy Jones, it's expected. If you're a top level fighter, then a guy at Roy Jones's age with all the miles on the clock that he has, you would expect a fighter to beat him. So it's hard to really credit him too much for that win, but he got the knockout and it was impressive. As I said, he also beat James Toney. James Toney isn't much of a threat at this stage. But what he is still awkward. He's still a little bit elusive, a little bit, sneaky with his counter shots. So, the fact that he was able to dominate James Toney was quite impressive. But again, you can't give him too much credit for it because he was past his prime. So, but I mean, is the other guys that he's fought, like I said, Guillermo Jones, Marco Huck, Victor Ramirez, Latif Coyote, these are all guys at their prime. So, I mean, Denis Lebedev, he's just been around for such a long time. He also beat Enzo Macronelli at his prime. He knocked him out in 3 rounds. And that was back when Macronelli was still very dangerous. So, Denis Lebedev, okay, this guy's a veteran. He's been around for a long time. Okay, he's very dangerous, very smart. He's gotten through, in my opinion, mostly on grit and toughness and determination because, he's been in a lot of situations where he's taken a lot of damage or he's been hurt or he's been on the bad end of a decision. And, like against Marco Huck, for example, because a lot of people felt he won that fight. And, he's just a guy he's had his ups and downs. He's been around for a long time. He's now in his late 30s. And at this stage, he's a very wise, very dangerous, however, fading veteran. Now, he's going up against Murat Gassiev. Now, Murat Gassiev, for those of you who haven't watched Murat Gassiev, because I know he isn't really that well known, he's a very young yet very dangerous cruiserweight from Russia that in his most recent fights have mostly taken place in America. He's been fighting on PBC. Now, when I first watched him, it was when he fought Aisha Thomas. Now, I've since watched that fight a few times again. I mentioned in my last video where I was talking about this fight that I wasn't sure if the punch really did land after the bell. However, I've gone back and looked at it, and it was slightly after the bell. I don't believe it was intentional, but yeah, basically he hit Aisha Thomas at the end of one of the early rounds after the bell, and Aisha Thomas couldn't continue, and the fight got ruled a no contest. However, it was clear to me watching the fight that Murat Gassiev was the stronger man. He was the bigger puncher. He was the better boxer too. and I felt he would have won the fight anyway. So, I mean, we'll consider that a victory. I mean, I really don't think that that's worth noting down as a blemish on his record. After that, he fought a guy called Jordan Schimmel, and it was a candidate for knockout of the year. Beautiful left hook, flush on the chin, almost took the dude's head off. I mean, it was a really, really powerful left hook, really well placed, and it just goes to show you how much leverage this guy's able to get behind his punches. I mean, in my opinion, Murat Gassiev, and again, you might disagree, in my opinion, he is the biggest puncher in the cruiserweight division. That's just my opinion. I mean, it's between him and perhaps Maris Bridis. There are other guys that hit very hard. Obviously, Glavatsky hits very hard too. Even Tony Bellew hits very hard, but I don't think they're quite at the level of this guy. This guy is a monstrous puncher. Just that left hook that took out Jordan Schimmel. Go and look at that punch, man. I mean, it would have knocked heavyweights out cold. It really would have. I mean, and the straight right hand that he throws too. He's also got a very, very effective straight right hand. That was the punch that had Isa Thomas out on his feet. So, this kid, he's only 23 years old. However, for his age, he's very well developed. He's very strong, very powerful, very big. He's a very, very big cruiserweight, this kid. And, he's significantly taller than Denis Lebedev. Now, Denis Lebedev only stands at about 5'10". He's actually a pretty short cruiserweight. I think that this guy is about 6'3", 6'4". So this guy's going to have a height advantage, reach advantage, and a youth advantage, being the much younger, much fresher guy with much more energy. Now, thing about this fight, it's a classic old veteran who's still got it against a young, up-and-coming, yet fairly untested lion. Now, has to be said, Murat Gassiev, as good as he looks, and as powerful as he is, and as dangerous as he is, and as confident as he is, hasn't been in with the level of competition that Denis Lebedev has been in with. Now, I mentioned this same thing in my prediction for the Glavatsky versus Usyk fight. It was one thing that I had on my mind, was the fact that Glavatsky had been in back-to-back fights against top-level cruiserweights. He'd fought people like Steve Cunningham and Marco Huck, whereas Usyk hadn't fought anywhere near that level of competition. He had only had 9 fights against, borderline journeymen. So going into that fight, it was very difficult to say whether he would be able to operate at world level, because we hadn't seen him do it. Now, he did manage to operate at world level, and he did defeat Glavatsky. Now, but we couldn't have, you couldn't have really known it, because you haven't seen him do it against world-class opposition before. So, sometimes when a fighter looks great on the eye test, sometimes they are actually great, even if they haven't got elite level competition on their professional resume. And we saw that with Alexander Usyk. So perhaps it will be a similar situation with Gassiev. But Gassiev, the thing is, he didn't really have the amateur pedigree that Usyk had. I mean, Usyk was a very, very well accomplished amateur, gold medalist. The guy had been around for a long time. This guy's still very young. Okay, he's in his 20s, his early 20s at that. So obviously he hasn't had the kind of the kind of training and has been in all the top level, elite level training camps in the amateurs that Usyk had been in. And obviously Usyk had sparred with the Klitschko's and stuff like that. So, this dude really can't compare to Lebedev at all in terms of resume and experience. But sometimes resume and experience doesn't matter. Okay, sometimes youth and energy and confidence and self-belief and power, and of course physical strength, sometimes that can overcome a much more experienced opponent. Now, Denis Lebedev, let's talk about styles here and how this styles match up. It's going to be very difficult for Denis Lebedev to deal with a guy as tall and as a guy that can hit you from across the ring like Murat Gassiev, because Lebedev, one thing about Lebedev is he's never been great defensively. Now, he's very good up close. Now, being a short, stocky southpaw, he's able to get inside and hit you with a little short right hook on the inside and a really powerful straight left. He's a decent body puncher too. When he fought Ramirez in his last fight, I watched that fight and I was very impressed by how quickly he was able to break Ramirez. Now, I know that Ramirez, there was questions on his ability, since he had a controversial draw against Oval McKenzie, which a lot of people thought McKenzie won. But Ramirez was still very durable from what I'd seen of him. He was pretty tough. He had a good chin. And, Denis Lebedev was able to systematically break him down in 2 rounds. So that I found very impressive. So Lebedev, obviously, even at this stage and how long he's been around, he can still fight. I mean, the guy's still very, very effective. And, it's going to be interesting to see if he can get to Murat Gassiev early and maybe take his confidence away. That's something Lebedev has to do, in my opinion. Lebedev, he has to take the initiative in this fight. Okay, he can't be on the back foot just trying to counter. He has to come forward. He has to capitalize on the fact that he's the shorter man with the shorter arms, and he has to get inside, in my opinion, because if this turns into a boxing match on the outside, I have a feeling that although Lebedev is more experienced and perhaps more skilled, I have a feeling that the much younger, much stronger, and much taller guy on the outside is going to be able to have an advantage from that outside, because like I said, he can hit you from across the ring with a left hook. He can hit you from across the ring with a straight right hand. I mean, the guy's very powerful. He's got a decent jab. He sets up his punches nicely, throws a few feints every here and there. He's not the most elusive fighter in the world, obviously, but I mean, he's a cruiserweight. I mean, what a cruiserweight is. So, I'm really looking forward to this fight, guys. I'm just so excited. I can't wait to see it. One thing I will say, and I will state this categorically, Denis Lebedev, he is gonna have to be seriously careful of that left hook. I mean, because if Denis Lebedev thinks he can just lead off with a lead right hook, and he thinks he can take this dude's power, he's mistaken. I mean, that left hook from Murat Gassiev is fucking amazing. It's just supremely powerful, and Denis Lebedev is going to have to watch for it, because he takes one of those shots, he could get knocked out at any point in any round. So, yeah, Denis Lebedev, he's going to have to be very careful of that left hook. I mean, the straight right hand too now, because Denis Lebedev being a southpaw, I have seen him be hit with straight right hands in fights several times. I believe in the Guillermo Jones fight, he was hit with quite a few straight right hands and other punches too, which of course led to him being severely damaged. Now, I know there was a lot of controversy surrounding that fight because Guillermo Jones, I believe he tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, so there's controversy there, but nonetheless, it still happened. Okay, it still showed that Denis Lebedev has vulnerabilities, and in my opinion, Guillermo Jones, although he's a very experienced veteran himself, and he's very tough and very big for the weight, I don't think that Guillermo Jones is quite as explosive as Gassiev. I think that Gassiev hits harder and is a heck of a lot more dangerous with his punches than Guillermo Jones is. Guillermo Jones more of an accumulation type knockout guy, a guy that will break you down, whereas Gassiev is he's a guy who will put you to sleep with a single punch. So, I think that Gassiev, he's a lot more dangerous for Lebedev at this stage. He really is. So Lebedev's going to have to be careful of that straight right and that left hook. And like I said, that's the reason why I think that Lebedev has to get on the inside here and maybe work the body, try and take away the confidence of this guy, because you don't want to give this guy any confidence on the outside. You don't want him to get confident throwing punches from across the ring, because then he'll get into a rhythm. And as we saw from the Glavatsky-Usyk fight, where Usyk got himself into a rhythm early on and was able to outbox Glavatsky from the outside, that's something you want to avoid here. You don't want to give this young guy any kind of rhythm to get his punches off from across the ring. So, yeah, Denis Lebedev here, he has to take the initiative. He's going to have to go through a very grueling training camp for this one. He's going to have to be on the front foot, and he's going to have to be the man in there. He's going to have to show this kid that he's in there with a much more experienced fighting man. He's going to have to try and break this kid, otherwise he could get broken himself. So yeah, this is just such a great fight. I don't really even know if I should call this a prediction, because it's not really a prediction, is it? It's just I might just call it a breakdown, because that's pretty much what this is. Just a breakdown of possible outcomes. One possible outcome is, of course, if Lebedev does what I think he should do and gets on the inside. He could take this guy into deep waters, take him where he's never been before, and outwork him and win a decision or maybe a late stoppage. Or Murat Gassiev could land a big shot at any moment, any moment of the whole fight and put him to sleep. Or, Gassiev could, find a way to establish his reach on the outside, land punches from across the ring and dominate the fight from the outside. It's possible. There's so many different outcomes here, but it's one of those fights. Whatever happens, I'll be happy because it's just, I'm glad that fights like this are being made in the cruiserweight division. It's consistently world-class fights. As far as where would I see the winner going, what can I say? I mean, Ryabinski, who promotes Denis Lebedev, has quite a sizable cruiserweight stable. I mean, he has Dmitry Kudryashov, who's a very dangerous, heavy-handed cruiserweight contender. He has Grigory Drozd, who's on his way back, former cruiserweight champion. So, he's got good in-house fights there for Denis Lebedev. If he does in-house fights, I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, you've got unifications with Alexander Usyk and Tony Bellew. Tony Bellew's fighting BJ Flores. I think Tony Bellew's going to get by that. We'll see what happens. I just don't rate BJ Flores that highly. I'm picking Tony Bellew to win that fight. I've actually got a breakdown of that fight on my channel already. You can check that out if you like. But yeah, this cruiserweight division, it's buzzing, man. Obviously, you've still got Glavatsky. You've still got Marco Huck. He's the IBO champion. I'm sure Denis Lebedev would love a chance to avenge his defeat to Marco Huck. So that's a unification for him there. So, let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching.